why are they asking me to do this? It's probably wrong. They probably spotted something that I completely ruined. My career is over, and all these takes, all these feelings that have no basis really take over.
It's a feeling the academics, especially women and people of color, often have: self-doubt, thinking they are fraud and likely die just because of chance, not merit, and sooner or later, someone will find out. Imposter syndrome often arises due to a lack of representation, that is, a lack of people that look like us, in particular in leadership positions. In my former department, out of the 29 research group leaders, 23 were men, that's 80%. Whereas women constitute 51% of the British population, only 20% were female. Also, only one PI came from a minority background, that's 3%, when minorities represent 13% of the population in the UK. The disparity is clear and widespread. And it's not exclusive to research. HP internal report found that men apply for a job or promotion when they meet 60% of the qualifications, but women only apply when they meet 100% of them. Men tend to overestimate their abilities and performance, while women tend to underestimate both. The actual performance does not differ in quality or in quantity. We'll have a conversation about this topic, and although your imposter syndrome won't go away simply by listening to this episode, hopefully we'll convince you not to let your self-doubt stop you from trying things and climbing up the next steps in the ladder. Go for it. Apply for leadership positions, submit grant proposals, showcase your work, be proud of your achievements, shoot for the stars. It turns out that confidence is just as important as competence because it leads to action. Lack of confidence keeps researchers from taking up new challenges they would otherwise be very capable of accomplishing.
That was Isabela Malta, one of our producers on the show. So you get the perfect job, you get into some fictitious room, and you start to feel a little like a fraud, like you shouldn't be there, like you need to fake it till you make it. Well, if this is you, sadly, you aren't unique. At least some of us at one point in our careers have felt like this. And it has a name: Imposter Syndrome. Welcome to your Digital Mentor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Boynette from the Wellcome Sanger Institute. And today we're discussing imposter syndrome. And joining me are two very special guests who, according to statistics, would fit the exact category for this affliction. But these two women are far from that. And I hope by the end of the episode, you'll agree and also come out thinking, yeah, I deserve to be here, wherever here is. We have Oluwaseun Ogundele, a research assistant at the Wellcome MRC Cambridge Stem Cell Institute, and is also the lead creator of a series of digital engagement platforms designed to increase the visibility of young BAME, that's Black, Asian, and minority ethnic role models in research sciences. And we also have Dr. Daniela Robles, who is a principal investigator at the International Laboratory for Human Genome Research, which is part of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Welcome, Seun and Daniela.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you. Hi.
So we'll start off with you, Seun. Can you tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do?
Yes, as you already mentioned, I'm currently working as a research assistant at the Wellcome MRC Cambridge Stem Cell Institute. I graduated about 2 years ago with an integrated master's in biochemistry, and after graduation, I was a bit stumped as to what I wanted to do next. I knew that maybe a PhD, but I didn't feel just ready for it just yet, so I decided to apply for research assistant positions. And when I was applying, I was just kind of putting all my fish into every basket and just taking it out, see what will come back. And and by God's grace and by luck, I guess, I am now here working in Cambridge. I made it.
You made it. It's not just by luck, sheer merit, I'm sure. And over to you, same question, Danielle.
So I am a group leader at the International Laboratory for Human Genome Research and the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And I started this group almost 5 years ago after a PhD and a postdoc there at the Sanger Institute in the UK. And it's been 4.5 years, and we're studying right now the genetics and genomics of cancer in the Mexican population with an emphasis in skin cancer melanoma.
Wow, thank you. You both are very, very smart women, and I'm really honored to have you both on the podcast. So we'll just kick right off with our discussion. First question to both of you is, in your own experience, have you ever felt like you're an imposter or a fraud? Have you ever felt that feeling? So I'll just throw that question to you, Seun, first.
Over the course of my degree, I think I felt it like here and there, quite sparse, but wasn't to the point that it was paralyzing. Because I mean, with London, it's quite a hot pot of diversity, and I had friends that were diverse, so I never really felt like too out of place. And also, I was a student, so I had that mindset of, okay, I'm here to learn. But I think once I started my position here at Cambridge and moving over and seeing, I think number one, seeing that there wasn't a representation of people like me, like a black female in science. I think in my building, I was the only black scientist. So I think that really just paralyzed me. It made me question my skills and my intellect and whether or not I deserve to be here. And also, I think in the day and age that we are, with like companies wanting to maybe increase their quotas of BAME, like I started second guessing, like, wait, am I just someone that is just like a token black person to show that they're, meeting certain quotas? But I've chatted at length with my boss, and I know that with the application process, I am here because I deserve to be here. But I think in regards to imposter syndrome, I think for me, it's been a mixture of like my own emotional and internal struggles, as well as the environment that I've been in that has not really encouraged or disproved that I should be here or not, if that makes sense. Because I mean, if you're in an environment where there isn't that many people like you start questioning why you're there and why there aren't other people like you. I've really struggled with that, especially in the first few months of starting my position as a research assistant at Cambridge. I've been working as an RA for almost 2 years now, and it is getting better. And I think with the passion project that I'm doing, Sharing in Science, as I'm trying to kind of increase the awareness of that, I think it's helping me as well as hopefully helping others who might be feeling the same in whatever institutions they're working.
No, that's really cool. And you've said one important thing, which is a characteristic of the imposter syndrome, is this internal narrative that we had. And I know I can say, for example, when I came and did my first postdoc at the SANG, which is in Cambridge, I did feel that imposter syndrome. So I completely get that it's largely an internal narrative. And I'm going to throw that question to you, Daniela, as well. Have you ever felt, with your very impressive CV, have felt like an imposter?
Thank you very much. I have. My experience resonates a lot with what Sean just described, because when I also moved to Cambridge, I saw that at least in my college, people that I knew there, I was the only Mexican, at least, of the people that I could see there. And that also felt that maybe it's some diversity initiative, maybe I shouldn't be here. And, you meet when I started my PhD, and you meet your friends, for the first time, and everyone is like, oh yeah, I did a master's in mathematics. I did a master's in computational biology. It's like, I have no master's. Like, what am I doing here? So I think, yes, for sure, I have felt it strongly at the beginning of new things, as Sean was also describing, I think. Also in my undergrad, when I started and I moved to a different part of the country, I also felt it because everyone had done like internships in science. And like, I had not done any of these things. So why am I here? Is it luck? So I think many people feel it from what I have read, and I have felt it, and I think it also gets better with time, but I don't think it disappears.
Yeah, I don't think it ever really truly disappears. But I also feel like, yeah, with time and you start to rest on your own achievement. And I think part of that comes from one, improving or kind of turning the idea around of that instead of fear, you kind of embrace it a little bit more. I always imagine as turning around and be the lion, kind of roaring at the feeling of imposter syndrome. And then also using that to drive yourself. If you think you need to work harder, is that you just saying it? But in fact, maybe you are working hard. So maybe it'll push you to get to where you need to go. I listened to a podcast once and a woman was given a promotion. It was some tech company. And she said two people were up for the job, a woman and a man. And the man came in and said, thanks for the promotion, for the idea of the promotion. This is what I'll need to do the job. And then the woman came in and said, oh, it was just thank you so much. I didn't think I could do this, da da da. And then she sat the woman down and said, the one thing you have to do is stop saying thank you. You deserve the job. You're in the running. You're just as qualified as a man. So I think one of those things, maybe also coming from another woman, and I think this is what you were touching on, Shion, is having somebody look like you. And we might not always get that, but can you tell us a bit more about this type of awareness you're trying to bring to this topic and kind of call to action that you're doing on social media as well?
Yeah, so I mean, the main motivation for starting the channel was, as I said, when I moved here and I literally was heavily underrepresented. And I also kind of could relate to that with my journey, even during like uni, of like not then realizing that actually I don't think I've even seen a black female PI. Like, have I had a black female PI come and lecture? Like, I never really was so conscious during my student years that, there's not that much representation. When I think of my journey as well, coming into research, like when I was in sixth form, for example, when I was 16, 17, 18, I didn't even realize that a career in research was something possible because there wasn't exposure to it, right? It was that I was heavily interested in science. I loved biology and chemistry. So I thought, okay, yeah, I'm definitely going to do medicine, right? And it wasn't until I applied and didn't get through and then I started my degree in biochemistry. It wasn't until my second year when I, by chance, was able to do a summer placement that I actually had exposure to research. And that for me was like almost it was life changing because it literally changed my career plans. So I think that in one hand is the lack of awareness of field like research, and that's why as another reason why I'm doing that, right? On my channel Sharing in Science, I try to vlog a lot to show what it's like to be in the lab, a day in the life of a researcher, working with stem cells, doing things at the lab bench, and just kind of seeing how you balance all that kind of stuff, and also trying to talk about my experience, my university experience. And I've just started like launching an Ask a Scientist series where I just go and speak with different scientists at the moment in my institute and talk about their experiences, because I think another thing with researchers that maybe can be misconstrued by lay audiences is that they feel like every person who's a researcher woke up one day, or like they were born thinking, yes, this is my trajectory, this is where I'm gonna go, this is the end point. And it's like you realize that no, it's not like that. For some people it's just by chance that they, like, I mean, for me it was by chance that I got to experience that. So for some people it wasn't their first option, it was through life experience and the opportunities that they had. So it's kind of like exploring that and really just letting that know and being transparent about it. But I think also in regards to representation, like I know that for me, as I said, I've not seen personally a female black PI, but I'm hoping that as I vlog and document my experience, hopefully it is also a good reflection of my career progression, because I know that, okay, I plan to apply for PhDs later on and potentially do postdocs and stuff. I'll see how the YouTube life works, but it's really about just being transparent about it, and just showing that, okay, this is what research is like. It's not going to be a complete representation of every form of research, because I mean research is so diverse, like depending on where you work at and what models you work with. But I think it's just that having that transparency and also showing that scientists are human beings. They have personalities, they're just like you, they just do research. So yeah, that's just kind of what I'm trying to do. And I always preface, when I introduce myself as a black girl in science, like literally hashtag black girl in science. Because I feel like
I love it.
when you hear that, it's almost foreign, because when you think of scientists, you might just have the stereotype of a middle-aged man in a lab coat, right? So it's like when you hear black girl in science, like that in itself, I feel is just breaking down certain stereotypes you have of just researchers and scientists. And that's why I always kind of preface my introductions, especially on the channel, with that, like hashtag black girl in science, because this is where we're trying to push the attention on. This is the emphasis that I want to make.
Wow, I love that you're on the podcast. It's like you've been cured of all imposter syndrome. I love it. Here's the cure, guys.
No. It's a journey. It's a journey completely.
It's
As you
true.
said, like, I think with imposter syndrome, it's at a new journey. Like, I am so sure, so sure that by the time I start applying for my PhDs and when I get a PhD, I'm going to experience it again. But I think because I've experienced it, like, at such heights, I'm aware of it now. And I think that's the thing with imposter syndrome of, once you know what it is, you know how to potentially tackle it. So, like, I know that I sometimes go through that internal battle of, like, downplaying my skills and my intellect and the things that I actually have that I could use to my advantage. But now it's like I'm aware that I do that. So when I, like, talk with my boss or my supervisor, like, and he says things objectively, then I'm like, oh yeah, I am smart.
Yeah, we're all smart.
So it's just like little things like that. I think once you know what the issue is, I think I literally remember the moment that I put a name to what I was experiencing, and that in itself was kind of freedom. I think I came to realize, I think I was watching a TED talk of a lady, a female in science, who was doing a TED talk in America, and then she said, oh, it's imposter syndrome. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what it is.
Yeah. an affliction that affects, smart, skilled, and successful people. And I think it's a quality that comes from being very self-critical. But you've said a really important thing in that you have to be transparent about your story and kind of how you went through. And Daniela, I read your article on women ahead of their time, which was really, really useful for a young person. I almost wish I read this article.
Thank you.
Starting out my PhD on how to get funding and never accepting the word no. Can you tell us a bit more about your journey? Because from that, I was like, man, you were asking governments for money. How did you get the email of the person to contact?
For sure. The thing is that it's hard to get funding in science, right? So I've seen many people that are discouraged in a way because you apply and you pour your soul and heart into an application and it takes, months to write and everyone reads it and gives you feedback and, it's a very long process and then no. And that's it. And then sometimes they don't even give you feedback to learn from. And it's like, it's so disheartening. So in a way, I feel that at least here in Mexico, we learned that early because we have a very visionary director, I think, in our undergrad studies. And he said, you know what, you come from Mexico, that's already a disadvantage in the science world. So you need to make yourself heard and you need to try hard and just don't give up. And I think when he said that, and he just said it, frequently, you start to think about it and, you start taking rejections not personally. You say, well, this is part of the system. At first it really hurts. It still hurts, but you kind of get used to it. And if you talk to people, everyone's like, yeah, I've had all these grants rejected and all these applications rejected. So you kind of start accepting that it's a normal thing. And when you accept this a normal thing, then you say, well, I'm going to try as much as I can. So I'm going to ask for money to anyone that allows me to ask them for money. So this is what I used to do back in the day where I wanted to go to do an internship after my undergrad first to the Sanger, actually, before my PhD. And of course, I didn't have any money. After asking a lot of people for money, I was lucky to get a scholarship that I also applied for. But then I wanted to do another internship and I, again, had no money. So I went to a lot of people in the government and a lot of people helped me to get into like their meetings, for example. And I would be just, a 22-year-old being like, hey, can you give me money? I mean, I want to do science. And most people would be like, just leave me alone. But some people would be like, oh, okay, a young person who wants to do science, tell me more about that. And some of them wrote me checks just like that, being like, yeah, buy a plane ticket with that, go away. And little by little, you start, just getting some of your funds that you need to do these research internships and things at the beginning of your career, I think, which is another thing that I think it's related to imposter syndrome, which is prove yourself, right? So you arrive to these labs being like, you don't have to give me anything. I'm free labor. I come with money. Just let me show you that I can do anything useful. So in a way, it's part of the same thing, being like, I need to get everything that I can so I can prove to someone that I'm good enough, hopefully. And then I can get an opportunity to do something else. In my research life, as a PI that needs to get grants to pay my postdocs and things like that, well, I'll just like apply to anything you can. And many people will say no, and many organizations will say no, but some will say yes, and usually that's hopefully enough to keep you going.
You need that one big yes, only one big yes, or many, many yes, many small yeses.
Exactly, and it lasts for years.
I read your piece and you said, you just showed up at the door to whom you eventually did your PhD with. Did you ever feel like, oh, how do I sell myself? How did you sell yourself to people like that?
So it's interesting because I think that back then, for that kind of introduction of, hire me kind of thing, I didn't feel it that much like this imposter syndrome. I was just enthusiastic and I wanted to meet these people. Actually, back then, I feel like I was shameless, really. I just didn't care at all what other people would think of me walking around campus with a picture of this person, finding him in the cafeteria. Everyone could see me and people were like, what's wrong with this girl with a picture of a PI going around? I'm looking for this person, yay! I guess it's because I still wasn't being proved in a way, because I hadn't been put in a lab, or I hadn't been, do this or do something. I was just trying to meet the person and be like, I like your papers. Do you want to come to Mexico? Do you want to give us a talk? I just didn't care. And I carried that in my brain, that this director had told us, you have to do something. If you write an email, these people won't reply to you because, you're probably at disadvantage when compared to other people. So you just have to basically show yourself at their door and be very insistent. So that's what I did back then, and I think to an extent still what we do to try and get noticed.
You hit a really nice point. I think even when I was searching for my PhD, there's one of the things they don't tell you. They give you an email to always contact for more information. And I always tell anyone who's applying for a PhD to definitely send that email and then insist on coming to see the lab, because one, they'll get to know you as a person. They'll see your enthusiasm for the project. So also read up on what the lab is doing. And I think showing your face really does change your trajectory. And I think you're a testament to that, just showing up face to face on the door. So another thing I wanted to ask you both is another point of feeling like an imposter. Maybe it's not just in group presentations, but in science we have to present our work. It's a run-of-the-mill thing. And I remember the first time I was asked to present at a conference, and you're terrified. But let's start smaller, like presenting to the lab. What are your guys' feeling on presenting the lab? Because I think that can also be quite nervous-inducing thing where you have, heads of the lab, people who've gotten FRSs, very senior people. How have you both handled it? And I'll start with you, Shun. What advice would you give people? Or have you felt like that?
Well, definitely. And frankly, I'm going to listen to advice today because I ain't got no advice at the moment.
Love your honesty.
In regards to like presenting, so the lab I work in, we're quite small. So we have the PI, we have 2 postdocs, one's a bioinformatician, and we have 3 RAs at the moment. So when it comes to presenting the stuff we've done in the lab, it's really quite simple. So it's not like full on PowerPoint presentation. It's just showing, oh, I ran a Western blot, I did a qPCR, these are the results, this is the dynamic that we see with gene expression and stuff like that. But just before the lockdown, actually, in one of the lab meetings, my boss was like, okay, I need you guys to start putting abstracts in for conferences. And then he suggested one, and I literally had like, a day to write up the abstracts and stuff. But for some reason, I got shortlisted to do a presentation, which scared the life out of me. So I did have a bit of anxiety trying to prepare for that. But unfortunately, because of the lockdown, I wasn't able to do that. So that's why I'm literally like, I need your advice, because I know that I know the stuff, but I always feel the anxiety of when it comes to actually presenting it. I feel like, okay, presenting it is fine, but then when it comes to questions, like, I know that I know the stuff, but when you ask me the questions, I'm like, wait, what did you say? What's English? It's something that I still struggle with. And I remember I was actually having a conversation with my boss recently of like, even in lab meetings as well, when it comes to like, okay, how I want to push projects forward, like, I have ideas, but I always then put it in my mind that, okay, I'm gonna sound really stupid. And even though I've been working for almost 2 years, I still have that mental block. And then there was something my boss said to me that I was like, oh yeah, do you know what, yeah, that's true. So I was like, I kept saying, oh, I feel like I'm gonna say something stupid. And he was like, yeah, you will say something stupid, say it and get over it, and let's continue, and let's just work through it. So I think him saying that kind of unlocked another thing of like, okay, yes, I have this inhibition, I might sound stupid, but the people that I work with now know me long enough to know that I am smart, that even if I do say something stupid, it's me trying to work through an idea that in my head to get to the treasure that will surface. So that was just a recent encounter that I had, that if I was to suggest an advice, that would be the only thing I have. But as I said, I am all ears.
I'm going to counter you with one thing. One, get rid of the word stupid in your vocabulary. I think that is a horrible word to ever say amidst the clever people that you both are. And I like the advice you got. And I think it's part of what Daniela was saying in terms of be a bit shameless. Like, yeah, it's shameless is not even the word. It's like confident. You're like, yeah, okay, maybe it was a silly question, but then it's to you to unpack that. And then what I always tell my students, especially when they're presenting, or any student, or any person who's about to present and super nervous, I'm like, you know the most about this specific thing in that room. You go into a room and you probably know you're the one who's working on it full time. So any question coming to you, you're probably still the best person to answer it. And then, I mean, this is going more into presentation advice, and hopefully Daniela can expound on this. But when you've just finished presenting, you've got to have a calm down moment, because I don't hear questions immediately. So I kind of take back and just repeat the question to the person, be like, oh, is this what you're asking? And then kind of breathe for a second and be like, if you don't know the answer, be like, that's a really good question. I think that's something to follow up. Always repeat with, that's a really good question. That buys you some seconds. And then you can really form an answer. I'm going to ask you, Daniela, to kind of give us feedback, also advice, but maybe anything you can give. June, any advice?
I was going to say exactly what you just said, Christine, about the repeating question bit, because I think that can make sure that you understand the question and also you breathe. I usually drink water immediately after a presentation. It's like, calm down, water. Who has questions? Just breathe. And you repeat the question. And I have learned that saying, I don't know, but maybe, it's acceptable. And as Christine was also saying, well, if you don't know and you're probably the most qualified person to talk about your work in a conference setting, for example, well, other people will probably not know either. So it's okay. You calm yourself. That being said, I think I've managed to. I almost don't get nervous at presentations. You get the heart rate and that kind of thing, but not too bad. But it wasn't always like that. I did have a bad experience when I was in one of my internships as just graduating undergrad, very very much in before starting my PhD. And I was due to give a lab meeting, and this lab was, very big lab. He had like 40 people or something. It was like massive. And the head of the lab was this person who was also very important, and never in the lab, and everyone fought for his attention. And I had an opportunity. I had never talked to this person in my whole internship of 6 months because he was never there. But I had this opportunity of, presenting my work. So I really tried hard. I did a whole animation, I remember, of the biological process. It was very, very, I poured my heart into this. And then I gave this presentation, I did this experiment, and this. And then this lab head just stands up. I hadn't even finished. And he was really angry. And he said, why are you doing these experiments? You have not read any of the papers of this lab. We've already done this. We know this. And I was like shocked, right? Because, you're kind of an undergrad that is doing what the postdoc is telling her to do. It was like, what? And then this postdoc started fighting back, being like, no, that's not exactly what we did last time. We did this other thing. And then they kind of started fighting. And I was like, in my presentation, I have another animation. So it was really bad, and I was really nervous, and it kind of ended there because everyone was angry. All these people, some of them left, some of them came back and said, oh, it was okay. It was like, really? I mean, this was really bad. So after that experience, I did have a long time, I think, of where I was feeling very nervous in presentation because, like, oh, it can happen. Like, someone can just rise and tell me this is stupid. This word again. This is dumb. You're doing something that everyone knows. So it was hard for a bit, but I learned that if I practice my presentation several times before I have to give it, and I know exactly where the transition is, and I can give it, much more confident. Your tone also matters. So if people see you doubting, maybe they're like, are you sure what you're saying? Whereas if you also say it confident, it's less likely that they're going to question your tone as well. And, all this practicing has helped. And also something that really helps me when I present is remembering that the audience is on your side, most of it at least. So if someone rises and tells you something like, this is wrong, or you didn't think of this, most of the people will think that's not a nice thing to do, and they will be on your side anyway. So the way you react, and if you could just keep calm and say, okay, well, I don't agree because of these, or we can talk about this later, you will be okay. It's that person that doesn't look good in the eyes of the audience. So remembering that, the repeating question, advice, and also practicing, I think it has helped me a lot just to control those feelings of feeling nervous. I still feel nervous, but it's not debilitating anymore as it was before.
Oh, I really like that. And the practice thing is such an important thing as well. And also you have to know yourself. Like if I practice too much, then I'll be over focused about falling over my words. So again, it's like you think there's a sweet spot. One of the symptoms of imposter syndrome as well is anxiety. So that's like the physical manifestations. I'm imagining, before a fight, Rocky's there, pumping iron, and you've got that Rocky song coming on, which we can't play for copyright reasons. But you know what I mean? You just gotta have a preparation thing. And for me, for example, before anything I present, I love coffee, but this is the only time I don't take coffee because I have enough adrenaline pumping through my veins. And also there's a sweet spot of sleeping. If I'm too tired, then I'm sluggish. If I don't sleep enough, I'm wired. Daniela, tell us, what's your prep routine for your big fight?
I must say something that happens to me now, and I think is related to imposter syndrome. And this is something, it's kind of a manifestation of my research life at the moment. I think other people feel this as well, but I'm not exactly sure. So this is a good moment to say it. So when people come and ask me to redo an analysis I've already published, or look into whatever I've already done and handed in, I get this anxious attack, being like, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be completely wrong. And they're going to discover that I never knew anything about this analysis. And it's going to be disastrous. And I'm going to have to retract all this, but all these feelings that have really no basis whatsoever for anything. And this actually has a physical manifestation because I feel really anxious. I start, trembling. My breathing goes very fast. And it has happened to me that for a whole day, I cannot work. When I open this analysis that I've already done, I will just open it and realize it's all wrong. And that's the end of my career. And why would I open my computer? No, I'm going to just go and watch TV and sleep. And I can't even sleep because I'm really worried. So I think this is also a manifestation of it because it's just not having any confidence of what you did a year ago, which is not so long ago. And every time this has happened, of course, I have to go and do whatever I have to do, like look back or redo something. And so far, it's been fine. It's like, oh no, I knew what I was doing. It's okay. Or, this makes sense. This analysis is not completely crazy or this logical. But it's something that I have not been able to get rid of. So every time still that someone comes and asks me to look back at something that I already published, I get this attack of, why are they asking me to do this? It's probably wrong. They probably spotted something that I completely ruined. My career is over. And all these takes, all these feelings that have no basis really take over. So something that I have adopted or tried to do when this happens is first recognize it, because now I know that it happens and it really probably has no basis. So it's first saying that, being like, okay, you have no basis to be feeling any of this. You haven't even looked at this thing. Like, why are you feeling this? And the next thing is like, what is the worst thing that can happen? Maybe it's wrong. And what happens? You made an honest mistake. You're human. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. So telling yourself that, what is the worst that can happen? It's not that bad, really. I think that really helps calm down. So in a way, just to answer that question of what's your preparation or, your how you attack this, is trying to think of the worst thing that can happen. Maybe even in presentations, what's the worst thing that can happen? Someone can rise and tell you, you're lying, you're wrong. Again, he's going to look like someone that is bitter or something. I mean, it's not your fault. So I think that that's something that I have been doing recently, just imagining the worst that can happen and just realizing it's not really that bad.
Yeah, the world will still turn around, Sharon, do you have anything to add to that, do you think?
I haven't really done like a lot of presentations like in my workplace, like really big ones. But I do realize now that I have sort of a mentor. So he's a postdoc in one of the neighboring labs, and he's also like a friend, so like a mentor in regards to like science and like prepping for stuff and like talking through experiments or things that I'm about to do in the lab, and just kind of checking that I have quite fundamental things down, but like I understand the basics. I think it's nice to have someone where you can kind of feel kind of vulnerable like that in front of, and he's definitely someone like that. So like it might be that I have a question that I feel like, okay, maybe I shouldn't ask my boss just yet. I want to like know the facts and be confident in the words I'm gonna say. So like I run things past him, and like I realize now that actually most of the times whenever I feel like I have a silly question, I normally preface it with like, oh, this might be a very naive question, but because I feel comfortable to do that, it's just kind of makes me less anxious in like asking things that I think might maybe put me in a negative light or something like that. But yeah, I think also with what Daniela says about thinking about the worst and realizing that it's not that deep. Life still goes on. Like it's not, you're not gonna die because of it. And actually, it reminds me of something like one of my lab members says of like, if there's no blood, it's fine.
Yes, and no blood or fire in the lab.
Exactly.
That would also be quite devastating, especially in a negative pressure room. But on top of that, like I think you said also a really important thing. The reason why science is collaborative. You need people. There's never one person on a paper. You need other eyes, and I think having a good support team is one of the important things in kind of working through science and starting to believe in yourself. Also having, let's say, your PI come to you and go like, oh yeah, that's actually really good. And another point I was going to add to Daniela in saying, having I don't know should always be in people's vocabulary, no matter how high you get. Because, sitting in a room, and one of my PIs once said to me, I don't know, can you explain it to me? And I was like, whoa, this is my moment to shine. So I think it's one of those things we should always have. Don't be an all know-it-all in things. And as we're coming towards the end of our discussion, I want to ask you both, as two women of color, recently there was an article on the BBC by Maureen Zapala, who's a former NASA scientist. She got into the room and she realized, oh man, maybe I've been chosen because I'm a diversity hire. And you've both touched on this. And what she found herself was working much, much harder than she needed to, longer hours. But this obviously leads to slightly unhealthy practices. And we'll talk about this in the next couple of weeks about burnout. Have you both felt like this and have to kind of overcompensate for being in a room? I see you're both nodding furiously. So let's start with you, Shion, first.
I think definitely. I think mine, on one hand, it was overcompensating and trying to show my skills and my intellect. But I think, especially when I first started in Cambridge and being, as I said, the only black scientist, I felt that I also had to police myself as well. I don't know if that makes sense. Of like, I had to be very sure of what I was saying and not just say things for the sake of saying it, because I was so underrepresented. I know at least one person who prior to me had not really worked long term with a black person. So I had that in my mind of like, oh, I could be making or breaking stereotypes right now. So I kind of felt that pressure on my head of like, oh, I need to like, control what I'm saying. I don't want to paint black females in a bad light because I might have like a certain reaction to something or whatever. So I did feel that in the first few months of my work, but I think as more as like I've developed relationships with people at the institute, I felt less pressure to do that. I was literally just showing like that's who I am. I happen to be a black female, but that's how it is.
How about you, Daniela?
Yeah, it's very similar as well. When I started my internship and I realized that there were not many Latin American people on campus, I was like, oh, I need to make, a good impression here. We're worth it. I feel exactly that in a way, right? That the way you're judged is probably going to be applied to a lot of people from your either nationality or ethnic background. So I definitely feel the same there. And yes, this about working more to prove yourself, I think is very common for, at least for us and probably women in general in science. I remember, this is my pinned tweet, so maybe you read it already, but it made an impression on me when I was coming back to Mexico, and one of my members of the PhD thesis committee said that I was going to fade into mediocrity. And this is like, I have to work really hard for that not to happen. Every time I go to a conference, I still get these comments being like, and why are you there? Why are you not in the UK or in the US? And it's like, well, we can also do science here. I need to prove it to you. So, you work hard to get many grants, write a lot of them, try to get papers as fast as you can. And it's really not healthy in a way. I'm also trying to be now with this pandemic as well, just kinder to myself.
I think that's a really important thing. Be kinder to yourself and not to feel that you are, like both of you, feeling that you had to open the door for every other person of color that came behind you, but also be kind to yourself, knowing that, everyone is an individual. Yeah, you do the best you can, but also don't work yourself into illness. But for now, we're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors. But when we come back, we'd love to hear what your take-home messages are from both of you to our listeners. We'll be back.
This episode is supported by Advanced Courses and Scientific Conferences, a program which develops and delivers training and conferences that span basic research, cutting-edge biomedicine, and application of genomics in healthcare. Through engaging and networking, the events educate, inspire, and transform careers worldwide.
This episode is also supported by the Wellcome Sanger Institute. It undertakes large-scale research that forms the foundations of knowledge in biology and medicine. It uses the power of genome sequencing to understand and harness the information in DNA. The Sanger's discoveries are used to improve health and to understand life on Earth.
This episode is also supported by social entrepreneurship to spur health. The SASH group uses crowdsourcing to enhance health and health research with a focus on low and middle income countries.
So we've covered quite a few things in discussion, and thank you both for being so honest and sharing your experiences. I was wondering if you can give 1 or 2 points to our listeners so they can take away from the discussion on how not to feel like an imposter. I'll kick off with you, Daniela.
So what I would say is recognize that this is a common feeling. Many people feel it at some point in their careers, and it's normal, and you're not unique, as you were saying, Christine, at the beginning. So acknowledge that. And when you realize that, then you can start separating your feelings from the facts and start saying, well, I'm actually good. I managed all of these things. That's probably not related to how I feel. I would also say, this may sound bad, but it touches on what I said just now. Lower your standards, because it's related a lot to perfectionism, and that's just not attainable. So lower your standards doesn't really mean, do sloppy science or whatever. Just accept that the things cannot be perfect, and just make sure that they're good enough, that your science is reproducible and is well communicated, but that's okay. Every figure doesn't have to be absolutely perfect in the perfect color scheme and, that kind of thing. I would say that's how what it has helped me deal with these feelings. So acknowledge, separate feeling from fact, and maybe lower your standards a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you so much. How about you, Shun? What are your messages to our listeners?
Yeah, I have to say, I definitely take on board what Daniela said. The first thing, separate what's in your mind and facts. You need to see things objectively, and I think it also helps as well when you can to talk about it and let it be known to others around you that this is what is going on in your mind, if that makes sense. Because sometimes you need someone to be objective and to show you that, okay, on paper these are the skills. This is how you are. You have the skills, you've worked hard for that position. So I think it's realizing that. And also for me, going back with what I'm passionate with, the whole aspect of representation matters. I think just when you can, and I think we as scientists should also maybe feel a bit more of a duty to share with others, with our families, with lay audience, the kind of things that we do, and just to make everything a bit more transparent, especially as I think we all on this call are females, minorities. So I think sharing our experiences and just letting it know, to the younger generation that is a potential career path that they can go on. I mean, at the moment, I feel like, okay, maybe the career environment is not maybe the best at the moment, but there is a change, and I do see a change happening. There is that shift, so it's being aware of that and just having that vision of, okay, we want to make the environment better for those who are coming. So yeah, keep the good fight. Science is fun, and yeah.
That's such a nice way to end it. Science is fun. And thank you so much to both of you for giving such poignant points for takeaway. And I think both of you are echoing that you need to trust yourself. And again, there's this wonderful saying, I think my dad used to say to me, but everyone knows this, is fail to prepare and you prepare to fail. So I think just trust that you are smart, skilled, and you are there by merit, not just by luck or diversity hire or anything horrible like that. On that note, I'd just like to say thank you both for coming on the podcast. Would you be able to share with our listeners where they can find you on social? So sure, if you go first.
I am on YouTube mainly at Sharon in Science, also on Instagram and Twitter, and you can also find me on LinkedIn by my name, Oluwaseun Ogundele. So yeah, go give a like and subscribe and say that you came from your mental podcast.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. And Daniela, can you share with our listeners where they can find you?
Sure, I'm much more boring than Sean. I only have a Twitter account, and it is at Daniela_Oaks, because my last name means Oaks in English. And also in LinkedIn with my full name, Daniela Robles Espinosa.
Oh, perfect. Oh, we've learned some new Spanish today, Oaks and Robles. Thank you so much for that. And thanks to both of you again for coming on the podcast. And for our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Please follow us on Twitter at mentor_podcast. That's mentor_podcast, where we'll let you know when new episodes are released. You can also listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud by searching for Your Digital Mentor Podcast. We now have an email where you can send your comments and questions to, so please reach out to us on inquiries@yourdigimentor.net. That's inquiries@yourdigi,